Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Welcome to the Networking RX podcast. I'm your host, Frank Agan, founder and president of AmSpirit Business Connections. Today, we have another great guest. I'm really excited about this. But as our ongoing subscribers know, often on this podcast, I will share ideas, insights, and best practices for building professional relationships and excelling at business networking. But occasionally, I try to bring on subject matter experts, authors, speakers, thought leaders, social scientists, people that can share their knowledge about building relationships and really kind of supplementing the things that I talk about. And they'll help us understand better why we interact the way we do. Today, I have Pete Turner on. He is a former combat spy with over 1,000 combat missions in places like Afghanistan, Bosnia, Iraq. And he attributes his success to his ability to create trust with the most dangerous and evil people in the world. Well, certainly in that area, maybe the world, who knows? And by starting with trust, Pete was able to collect intelligence, meet the right people, and answer the unknown questions. So, Pete, thanks for coming on the program. Thank you for your service to this country. Don't reveal too much. I don't want to die over this.
I'm not in the harming people business anymore, Frank. So,
Okay.
so you're safe
I'm
with
good.
me.
No, but I'm totally fascinated. You know, you are building trust with the enemy. And that, to me, that totally fascinates me. And before we hit record, we were talking about that. As much as we would like our lives to be just surrounded by great people, and for the most part there are difficult people along the way that we have to have relationships with them too. So I'd love to hear your thoughts and how you got doing what you're doing, and how you got into working as a combat spy. That would be great.
Well, I mean, I was in the Army and I was a counterintelligence agent. And from the internal side, from the American side, we say, like, I'm an intelligence collector and all these other ways of not saying spy. But the reality is, Frank, is that that's exactly what you are. So I have to go out into their space, into their neighborhoods, their hamlets, their towns. And, well, what would you think if someone showed up and started asking a bunch of questions, especially if it's a war-torn place? You would just start with, that person's a spy. I mean, that's what Iran does. When Iran snatches up people, they don't forget to accuse them of espionage, right? Every time they get tried for that. So that's just the reality of where I am. Is I go to these dangerous places back when I did this sort of work. And my job was to go out and find out the unknown unknowns. And people often laughed about unknown unknowns, but that's the thing. That's what keeps you from winning. Is there a limiting factor to what we do? And what I determined from doing this a lot, pretty much more than anybody you're going to meet, was that if I led with trust, and if I figured out how to build trust, and people often say, build rapport, build trust, and then that's where they stop talking about it. But if you could codify, systematize these things and learn how to test it. So you're like, I actually do have good rapport, and here's why. And not worrying about accomplishing any goal before that. Yes, you're going to talk about other things, but my job is to go find terrible people, because they're the ones that are going to cause the most harm in a region. And if I can do that, that means I've met 10 other people that lead to that person, because that person is likely not having an ice cream next to me. And if they were having an ice cream next to me at the counter, they probably wouldn't say, hey, I'm a warlord. Who are you? What do you do?
Right. What sorts of things would you do to build trust? I mean, it's a different environment than the business world, where you show up with donuts on a Saturday or something like that.
Right. Yeah. So the way I look at trust is like an exchange account, and I come from America, so I've got a lot of interest in who I am. I live in California. That's interesting to people not from the United States. And so when I show up, I have this personality that I can draw from, and I can extend credit to them on trust. And so I'm in their dangerous place. I'm in their town, and I want to be curious with them to see what it's like to be them. Because if I can understand who they are and what they're doing, if I can understand the condition of someone, then I have the ability to potentially help improve their condition. But if I come in with preconceived notions, if I don't want to say over prepare, but if I prepare and believe that preparation makes me somehow prepared for my job, then I will actually be underprepared. So sure, I'm going to read some books and try to understand, but mostly I'm going to go to that source and try to specifically understand what they're doing, what their day-to-day life is. And I call this the ground truth. It's below the tactical level, because then you can determine the most simple, obvious ways to make yourself valuable to that person. And if I focus on their values, their culture, and working within their system, it's much more comfortable for them to work with me to accomplish my goals.
So things like, are they married? Do they have kids? Are they into sports? I guess all we ever see of images of those areas are war. I assume it's not war 24/7. They probably have leisure activities of some, alcohol, whatever it is. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a great example. Actually, I was talking to a village, and I'm like, what do you guys do for like fun? Like, young boys need to go out and run around and do things. What do they do? And they're like, oh, we have this form of wrestling. And I was like, tell me more about that. And they're like, well, it goes like this. Can you guys just have someone do it? And so they're like, yeah, we'll go get a couple of guys for you. And they put on this impromptu performance. It was kind of a sumo form of wrestling, basically trying to get someone off of their feet and using belts instead of just smashing into each other. But it was something that the Army, and we'd been there for, 12 years at that point. They had never even considered asking. And so it blew everybody away. And then the Army, God bless the Army, they're my people, but they're like, let's organize a wrestling tournament and wrestling academy. And I'm like, no. This is not for us to do. It's just for us to understand this is part of who they are, and we can learn more about it, but there's no problem to solve here. This is not a tool to accomplish your goal. This is a tool to build community trust and to understand who you're working with so you can work with them better.
When I'm dealing with people on an everyday business, in an everyday business environment, we make mistakes all the time, but if I make mistakes reading that somebody is trusting me when they're not, it's disappointing. Things don't go well, right? You lose the deal. It doesn't move as fast as it could. But in your environment, doing what you were doing as this combat spy, if you screwed that up, it's life or death. So I guess my question is, what were the things that you looked for to kind of give you some assurance that, okay, this person's trusting me? Is it, some sort of tells on their face or body language?
Actually, I just recorded an episode of my show with Michelle Rigby Assad, who's a CIA agent. And we were talking about this very thing, the liars, the embellishers, and the truth tellers, and trying to determine what those things are for you personally, because everybody's going to do it slightly differently. And I think both of us would agree that it's the context, it's the contextual things about what they're saying. She's building a course and she talks about Bernie Madoff and his own admission that if the people investing with me just talk to me for 15 minutes and ask them detailed, pointed questions, it all would have came apart because I didn't know what I was doing. There was no way to defend this. And so what that person typically does is they say, well, I can't tell you that until you give me the money. And that can be a thing for real, but you have to try to suss out, is this person worthy of my trust and my time and my money? And in Bernie's case, it was no. Elizabeth Holmes is another example she brought up. And it's someone who they say they're really solving these incredible problems. But when she was first out there doing it, I thought, this lady doesn't seem seems like this is phony to me. And sure enough, I'm not omniscient or anything, but she set off, and I couldn't tell you why, but she set off alarms with me. And I'm like, there's a problem there. And I can just sense it because I've done it a lot, but I can't always put my finger on it. And I don't trust my intuition. So when I get that hint, and this is what elevates my game above somebody else's, is that, okay, my gut tells me something, but I know not to trust my gut because it's been wrong plenty of times. But now I'm like, okay, but let's assume that my gut is right. Now let's test what it says and see if there's something there. And if they lack context for what they know, or if they hide the context, then I'm not going to spend time with that person or money. I mean, most of the times I can sound like I'm perfect and I always walk away from a bad deal. I certainly don't. But sure. It's that fallibility that I accept in my own sense of things through my own accepted mistakes that I've learned to kind of dance between the raindrops sometimes.
I think that's interesting that, do you trust your gut? Do you trust logic? And you're basically saying, I'm going to start with my gut and see what that has to say and then kind of test it out. It's, however that manifests itself. And I guess the higher the stakes, the more testing you're going to kind of do.
Yeah. I might even put a test in front of the gut too, is I'm going to start with no, or I'll start with yes and see if they can get me off of yes. And then once I've got that region dialed in, I'll have my dial put right in between yes and no where I think it needs to be. And then that will give me kind of a compass bearing on the person I'm talking to. Because you got to understand, my job, if I'm doing it well, someone is going to say, Pete, come to my house. I want to feed you food and introduce you to my boys. And then I've got to decide, yes, no. Right. Am I going to put myself in this person's protection? If they're honest, I'm protected and no one can make me safe in that valley, not even the army. If they're not, I'm dead. So right. You've got to sort these things out. And for me, a lot of my work has to be done outside of the influence of the army. And so a lot of times, and I don't want to make this sound like I was on my own all the time, but I have to separate myself from my army peers to be acceptable into these environments so that I could get further in and then potentially go somewhere on my own or with a very small team, because that invitation protects me through culture, through understanding, and through a genuine sense of care. And that's a high risk trust. You don't start at high risk exchange of trust in dangerous places. It takes weeks, months, if you know what you're doing, to get to that point where you're like, yes, I will make this step.
I guess the one question I have going back, how did you get into this? I mean, I have friends who went in the Army. Thank God they didn't get into this work because they'd have been horrible at it. But somewhere along the line, I mean, I don't know, maybe you were in high school and said, I want to be this spy or something like this, or you enlisted, or how did it all work?
Yeah, there was a recession when I graduated from college.
And, there you go.
And nobody really taught me how to get a job. And just being honest, one of the things, it was the early 90s. And one of the things was, and I wanted to get into sports broadcasting. It was a time when we were being focused on not just old white dudes getting jobs doing that. They wanted to bring in diversity, and rightfully so. And so the job pool shrunk up for a guy like me quite a bit. I didn't know that until later on. Then I could see it. I'm like, oh gosh, that's right. This was the market was changing, and I graduated just at a bad time. And so I had to find something else. And so for the first time in my life, I considered the Army, and I tested well. And they said, well, this is a good job here because I've never put anybody in it. And any job like that with the high number, my job code was 97 out of, maybe 99 numbers. He's like, that means it's a good job and you should take it. And so, because when you read the counterintelligence agent, that's what I was, the description, it doesn't say anything. And he's like, That's a good sign. MP, you can see what MP is. It's simple. This one, it's intelligence and I don't understand it. So you should go do it. And so that's literally how I did it. And then within my discipline, there are a lot of sub-disciplines that you could be in. I could be a lie detector guy. I could be a guy that places bugs or searches for bugs, all kinds of different things to challenge the enemy's ability to do intelligence. It just happened that I ended up in a unit where we did tactical intelligence, which means you go out and you're doing very immediate collection of intelligence. And again, that just worked out well because I'm a pretty rugged guy. I'm likable. And then within my discipline, there's also people that are good analysts, good people that are good at designing operations. And there's people like me who are great at the stuff on the ground. We all want to be the ground guy, but the reality is not all of us want to be. And so you have to sort of find your way in. And like many things, you just sort of self-select.
Right.
The other thing that makes me different is on this path was that I wasn't good at I wasn't bad at being in the Army, but my personality type is I'm very much a wild horse, which doesn't do well in the Army. And so I was better at being with the Army. I get them, I understand them, I speak commander very well, but you don't want me in formation because, my mere presence in a training room will make it look like I'm not paying attention. And so it's just something about my vibe. But you put me into Bosnia and I'll have an entire bar singing songs, because I'm good at that. And so it was better for me to be with. And because I was with the Army, not in it, and I was working as a federal civilian or whatever it was, I was able to go out every day. When a lot of people, you rank out of that job, you go do other things. And so I got to stay on the ground and just became elite in my ability to go out and work on these things like trust building. I didn't start at trust building. I had to get there through a lot of years of exposure to dangerous environments.
Do you think your background in school with broadcast journalism helped you? I mean, you obviously are very articulate.
Yeah, it did. It for sure did. I knew how to look for a story. I knew how to write a story. I knew how to communicate, and I understood communications well. And then I got a master's degree while I was in the Army, and it too created for me a unique ability to see the problem. And I got a degree in organizational management. And so when you look at throughputs, and this is the biggest thing that I ever did for the Army, is I would look at the commander's mission statement, which is usually a 4-part statement. And I would say, I can't really help with some of these, but these areas I can help with, and I can help you understand if you're getting the outcomes that you want. And I don't have to achieve anything other than the truth for the commander. And so once I built trust with them, I could go out into space. And the example I often use is, if we're trying to build capacity for the schools, and we're especially worried about girls going to school, and we'll go out as the Army and we're like, look at the school, they got 80 girls going to school. Well, what happens the next day? What happens a week later? Because that's what that's the unknown unknowns. And so I would go out and be like, hey, let me take a left and go to this village really quick while I'm on a patrol, and let's go see if there's girls in school today. Oh, there's not. Well, now the CEO can say, hey, hang on a second. We got to slow down. We're not getting this right. I'm being briefed one thing, but the reality is something different. So that's the result of these things. The result of my experience taught me to ask that next question, to go see that operation the next day. And that's that organizational management skill, is what really is going on, not just the performance of it, but the actual day-to-day ground truth.
Interesting. Let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about your podcast. Let's talk about your state-sized, you're not a combat spy anymore.
No.
Although you live in California, Lord, one could argue.
Yeah.
I guess, what are you up to now? What is?
Yeah, well, I've got a show called The Break It Down Show. We're coming up on 1,000 episodes, should be there next month. And I've been at it for quite a while. And what it's evolved into is really just a continuation of my work. So I'm not a combat spy. I'm not even a spy now, but I go out and use the same skills. I've had you on my show. I've had all kinds of incredible authors and world famous people, Hall of Fame members, Pulitzer Prize winners. I've had them all on the show. And I basically am always looking for them to give me something that they've not given anybody else, to ask them an aspect of what they do. The other day I had on Brandy Roderick, who was 2001 Playmate of the Year. And I asked her, I'm like, what's something that you do that you think, I'm a Playmate of the Year, and look at me doing this? And she's like, yeah, I scrub toilets in my Airbnbs. No one expects that, but she's like, yeah. I really do that. I really get on the ground and I clean up other people's toilets because that's what you have to do to run this business. And it's stuff like that that I grab on the Break It Down show that really, it illuminates life and systems and people in a way that I think is truly unique. I just had Michelle Rigby Assad on, like I said today, and we talked about being a spy at a level that you're just not going to find anywhere else.
Right. Yeah. I mean, going on your website, your podcast website, I mean, it's, there's quite a list of people there. So almost 1,000 episodes. That is, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Anybody you're looking to get on that you haven't been able to get to?
Oh, I mean, there's always people, especially like when they pass and you're like, God dang it. Yeah. We had the guy who was Ronald Reagan's favorite Secret Service guy, the
Mm.
guy who's like, hey, you guys can't just this. Ronald Reagan knows how to ride horses, not just sit on the back of an animal. And so we were actually going to get him. And he died, I don't know, 10 days before we were going to grab him on the show. He just
Wow.
had a heart attack. But it's things like that you can't get back. I mean, I'd love to have Tom Hanks on the show. I'd love to have Bono on the show. But I don't chase that too hard because I want the environment to provide it for me. So I'll continue to build the network. And then when the opportunity comes, it'll be the most normal thing in the world for Bono to say, yeah, of course, I'd love to come on Pete's show.
Oh, that's good. A good attitude. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's no lack of guests. There's all kinds of interesting people to have on.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, sometimes you find yourself saying no more than people say no to you, is what I'm finding.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate your time on the program. Very insightful. Again, thank you for your service to the country. Obviously, you made all the right decisions because you're here. You didn't head into that situation where it ended in death, which we're all thankful for. But thank you for your time today.
Oh, my pleasure. And thank you for acknowledging the service thing. It means a lot to me. And yes, I am here, and I have no idea how that happened, but it did. So it's been wonderful. Thanks so much for having me on, Frank.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.